It was just a few months ago President Obama declared the American war in Afghanistan over. But the U.S. military is still conducting regular airstrikes against insurgents and sending in special ops forces. The White House insists the movements are related to counterterrorism operations, but according to a report by the New York Times, officials in Washington and Kabul say it is much more aggressive and now extends beyond boundaries set by the administration. Let's bring in Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, retired from the U.S. Army and a senior fellow with the London Center for Policy Research. Tony, do you see it the same way that the Times does? I mean, are we getting more aggressive in a war that is supposedly over?
Yes, absolutely. And this is critical, John. This is essentially a Gettysburg moment for us on the battlefield. We have been slogging it out. We've been losing ground all over the globe. Yemen, Libya, Syria, Iraq. This is a chance for us to make a stand. And frankly, yes, it's good. It's necessary that we've gone past the White House artificially constrained boundaries on this. We are actually winning. There was actually what I would call a meeting engagement last week in a place called Kunduz between the Afghan military, supported by us, where they actually had an Alamo-type situation where they were surrounded, about to lose a province, and they fought their way back. So this is good news. We need to continue to support this sort of thing.
But we have spent years and untold millions training the Afghan military. It's my understanding, based on this article, the Afghan military can barely stand up for itself.
But it has to. And this is where we've noticed from Iraq, leaving too soon, precipitously, resulted in the complete diminution of that military force. So I think by having them pushed out to do their own fighting is going to help. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be quick. But, John, this is necessary. Plus, there's a new threat on the battlefield, something called ISIS. ISIS is now trying to basically take over the al-Qaeda network, which would make our job 5 times more harder. And I think there's actually room here to work to push the Taliban back towards a negotiated settlement with the Afghan government, and then we all deal with ISIS. If not, ungoverned space is the key here. We cannot permit that to happen. Everywhere we've seen ungoverned space, ISIS fills immediately.
But you know what happens when political pronouncements sometimes clash with military realities. The president has said this war is over and those American troops are only on the ground for training and some defensive purposes.
And he said the same thing about Iraq, and look how that turned out. John, I hope the president's learned from his mistakes on this. We have to do what's militarily and operationally necessary to continue what we've done, our investment. We've invested. John, last time we talked about this back during the surge first started. We talked about going big or going home. They went big, but they didn't focus on winning the war. Now we are actually in the position to actually start making progress against the Taliban. We have to actually use this smaller footprint, these 10,000 troops, effectively to support the Afghans, but more importantly, get back on the offensive, to be the most bad tribe on the field, to do what's necessary to achieve victory over those elements which are trying to destabilize the region.
It is already, and has been for a while, the longest war in our nation's history. You know, people at home are tired of it. Can there be a real end other than the president pronouncing this war over?
Ultimately, the footprint we have now is the right one. We have to do everything we can, and I talk about this in my book, Operation Dark Heart, a Northern Ireland-style peace process where you see a negotiated settlement between the Taliban and the Afghan government. They're all Pashtun. We need to push them back together to find a way to resolve it. With that said, we have to have military force to kind of ensure the Taliban are willing to come back to the table and do that. President Obama gave up 5 Taliban leaders for the Bergdahl trade, which we lost all leverage. There's other ways of doing it. Now we're doing it militarily.
All right. Let's talk about one other thing with you, Tony, real quickly. We're coming up on 4 years since the raid that killed Osama bin Laden. In fact, it was 4 years ago today, SEAL Team 6 flew into Pakistan under cover of darkness to try to find him. His death was officially announced a day later. Was it the watershed moment that the president said it would be? I mean, the campaign slogan was bin Laden is dead, GM is alive.
No, we took the foot off the pedal. We coasted 4 years, and we've seen the results of that being ISIS now coming out and taking the place of al-Qaeda as a global threat. Al-Qaeda is still functioning in Afghanistan and Pakistan. John, let's be clear here. Ahmad Zawahiri, Dr. Zawahiri, who was the target of our Operation Dark Heart back in 2003, is still out there running around leading al-Qaeda. So the job is not done. That was a moment in time to redouble our effort to go after the network. Right now, John, we can't even capture people, interrogate them. That results in the unmitigated loss of of innocent life, with the hostages last in January and other things going on. We need to get back into this to win it. President Obama needs to understand he needs to do more to push an aggressive policy to go after these guys.
And sadly, as we've reported many times, many of the documents retrieved by the SEALs from bin Laden's compound have not even been read yet, apparently.
It's totally insane, John. And this to me is treasonous. Those documents need to be exploited. Yeah. We need to take usable information out of it and act on it.
Tony Shaffer, good to have you back on.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Stick around.